Well, my guest today, it's an honor to have, is Catherine Austin Fitts. Welcome to World Outreach Church in Murfreesboro.
It's wonderful to be back at your beautiful church. This is a very wonderful, special place.
Well, I agree. You know, we started with a tent, so it does not always look like this. God's been very good to us. Uh-huh. You have a very diverse resume, and we won't walk through the whole thing, but I know you served in housing and urban development under George H.W. Bush.
Yes.
So you've got an extensive background in government and policy, investment banker. So some significant policy background, economic background.
Yeah.
Just for the people who don't know you. Money.
I love money.
Good for you. I'm not opposed to it. I always tell people if their money bothers them to bring it to me. So I will help find a good use for it.
Yeah.
If anybody's listening, that invitation is still open. But I think money is quite the issue today. I read an interview this week with Art Laffer.
Yeah.
Who's another Tennessee, or he's transplant here, but he had a lot of opinions on what's happening right now.
So I would say my greatest interest is on building wealth. In fact, we have at Solari, we have a building wealth program. And what is happening in this world is money is being used as a tool to liquidate wealth and steal wealth and centralize control of wealth. And, you know, that's part of what we have to be about, is decentralizing political and economic control in a way that builds wealth. And when I say wealth, I don't just mean financial equity, I mean living equity, people. You know, a great economy starts with all financial wealth comes from life, whether it's strong people, you know, healthy land, healthy water, beautiful plants, you know, growing corn. It all value comes from life. And if you look at the centralization that is going on right now, it's very destructive of life. And so, you know, we're watching huge destruction of wealth, and money is a tool, unfortunately, that's being used to do that. But money can be a tool that can build wealth too. So it's part of why it's important that we understand money and understand how to use it as a tool and understand it. You know, when you look at it and it says, "In God we trust," you know, we need to understand that there's a very powerful connection between healthy money and, you know, the God we love.
Yeah, I believe that. I'm curious. You said money's being used as a tool against us.
Yes.
Who's using the tool?
Central bankers. So we've experienced in this country, so I'll just speak as to the United States. So we've experienced since fiscal 1998 a financial coup d'etat. And as that coup d'etat has matured, a great deal of money has been stolen, literally moved out of the U.S. government and system. We have a website just dedicated to the, you know, what I call the greatest bank robbery in the history of civilization, missingmoney.solari.com. You can go read all about it. In August 2019, the central bankers voted on something called the Going Direct Reset. They meet every year in Jackson Hole in August. They're going to meet again in August this year in Jackson Hole, and they voted for the Going Direct Reset. And that's because you're running things, you've been building up liabilities in one system, moving the assets to the other system. As those liabilities grow and the system becomes non-sustainable, you need to essentially consolidate and move to your net. You need to reset and move to the next system. And so the central bankers then proceeded to inject $5 trillion into the economy. If you're feeling inflation, that's why. And then during the pandemic, I'm going to grossly oversimplify, you inject money into the economy, into your friends, right? So I inject $5 trillion into my friends, and then I turn and say, oh, we have a magic virus. We have to shut down small business and farms, starve income to that sector, and which the folks with the money can come in and consolidate ownership and control of market share or assets. So we saw, 500 new billionaires created during the pandemic, and over $1 trillion of wealth added to the billionaire class just as a result of playing that game. It's all part of the Going Direct Reset, and it's very much run top-down by the central bankers, and it's consolidating ownership and control of assets. And it's not over yet.
So central bankers, this is apolitical. This isn't about Republican or Democrat?
So I would say first and foremost, this is spiritual. This is a spiritual war. And this is really about, are we going to have, so let's step back. In the G7 nations, we have had a governance system where the fiscal side of the house is supposedly governed and managed by the people's representative through democratic republic or democratic systems.
Okay.
The monetary side of the house has been controlled by private bankers or banking systems. So you have a balance of power between the people's representatives and the bankers. The bankers have levered up the governments, essentially stolen a huge amount of money, put the governments in a debt trap, and now you're seeing the bankers consolidate control. And the reason we prepared this memo that I brought you on financial transaction freedom is what the bankers want to do is get complete control of the financial transaction systems so they have control of you and me, complete control. And the result of the reset, if they're successful, and I say they won't be, but if they're successful, is they will be able to mandate what you can buy, where you can go. They will be able to program your money, which they say is not your money anymore, it's their money. So if they want to shut down your bank account if you don't do exactly what they say, and they can literally say, if you want to practice Christianity, we're going to shut down your money.
We've already seen that
right
in some limited ways.
Right.
And it's growing. So if somebody wanted to get a copy of this document, where can they do that?
If you go to Solari.com, and just do a search for financial transaction freedom, we have a memo. We have a PDF of this document right there. Anybody can get it. It's public.
Okay. So that's Solari, SOLARI.
.com.
And the financial transaction freedom.
Right. And this is a very interesting product because we were meeting, because Tennessee is blessed with some outstanding legislators who have been working on protecting the financial transaction freedom of people in Tennessee. And it's one of the reasons I'm so glad I live in Tennessee. But we were at a meeting with some of the state officials, and one of the state officials, who's very, very intelligent, very capable man, said, would you write me a memo and describe what exactly is financial transaction freedom, what threatens it? Because it's complex. There are many different threats. And then how do we protect it? And so what we did is we created a section is here's how citizens can protect it. Here's how family and civic groups can protect it. Here's how investors can protect it. And here's how state and local officials can protect it. And the important thing to understand if you're listening to this and you live in the United States is in the United States, the powers not delegated to the federal government by the states are reserved to the states. And what that means is if we want sovereignty as individuals, we have the power through the states to protect sovereignty of our government, which is essential to our individual sovereignty. And a lot of that is protecting the states' financial transaction freedom, as well as the financial transaction freedom of the banks and credit unions in the state and the citizens. And your state legislators can do a great deal to do that.
That's a really important point in hillbilly Tennessee language. Any power that's not expressly given to the federal government belongs to the states.
Absolutely.
And we've really seen that script be flipped, or at least the federal government try to assume power that they don't deserve, don't have a legal authority to.
Right.
And we need the states to wake up and stand up.
Well, in Tennessee, you have a group of legislators. I started about 10 years ago. I was working with a wonderful entrepreneur and precious metals dealer from Middle Tennessee, Franklin Sanders, who also has a church. He's a pastor, a wonderful man. And he was working with Senator Frank Nicely. And he used to tell me about Nicely. And I was from Strawberry Plains, Tennessee. And I would say, who's also an organic farmer. I'd say, who is this guy? And he and Senator Nicely were working on step after step after step, lots of little steps to build freedom. And in fact, if you come to Solari and do a search for Senator Frank Nicely, you'll pull up a whole bunch of articles and interviews about all the different things he and his colleagues have achieved in Tennessee. You were just doing an interview with Laffer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so they got Laffer in years ago, and that's when they started to cut taxes. And, in Tennessee, they've just been doing a great job of following those principles. And they have achieved amazing things with cutting taxes. You can get ivermectin in the state. Man. They've got the sales tax off of gold and silver.
My father was a veterinarian, excuse me. I could get ivermectin all along. But I've been taking animal medicine since I was a little boy.
I'm from Hickory Valley. Everybody takes, because it's cheaper. Everybody gets the animal version, So when people said, oh, well, it's horse medicine, it's like, so it's fine.
And your point?
Yeah.
No, I know Senator Nicely. He's a remarkable man and has been a blessing to the state of Tennessee.
Right. And so I just came from Freedom Fest we had this event in Knoxville. It was wonderful. And I finally got to meet Halsey, which is one of my great heroes. Anyway, I couldn't believe it when I said, I love you. But it was a great gathering, essentially, of freedom fighters. One thing we can all do is find, if you're not in Tennessee, find the Frank Nicely and the Bud Halsey in your legislature, and make sure you know your state representative and get them helping those leaders, because they're there and they're doing remarkable things. State AGs are doing remarkable things. Some governors are doing remarkable things. But the state legislators, I think, particularly in the southern states, are really rocking.
Well, that's encouraging. I think the average person senses intuitively that something is seriously wrong, but doesn't know exactly what to do. And that can be almost foreboding. But in you have a real note of hope.
So there are so many things you can do. So we have an article called "I Want to Stop CBDCs, What Can I Do?" And CBDCs is one form of limiting financial transactions. And it lists, item after item after item. And each person is led to do something differently. It's very important we do what is comfortable for us. And I just have to tell you this story. I love this story. I had a subscriber in Phoenix call me. And she said, look, I am really tortured and I need advice. She said, she had been fighting a certain political thing. And she said, the time has come where I can't fight it. I'm a very introverted, quiet person, and I'm not comfortable being public. You're public, but I'm not comfortable. And she said, and I just feel like, I've reached the limit and now I have to go public and I just don't know what to do. So I said, are you a Christian? She said, yes, I'm a very passionate Christian. I said, have you seen the movie War Room? She said, no. I said, I want you to go get a copy of War Room. And if you feel led, I want you to create a prayer closet and I want you to fight this entire battle spiritually. I just want you to go to a prayer closet and I want you to engage in spiritual warfare against this effort. And she called me up 3 months ago, 3 months later, and I don't know the details. She says, "Oh my God, this works."
Who knew?
Well, but each one of us has our own way. Do you know what I mean? And so one of the reasons when I give lists like in financial transaction freedom or I want to stop CBDCs, what can I do? I try and give many different alternatives of what you can do so that each person, I always say, sit down, do a time budget, look at where somebody's draining or wasting your time, like turn off your TV and take 2 or 4 hours and dedicate it to doing the things on this list that you enjoy doing or you're comfortable doing or your friends will do with you. And it'll make a huge difference. So another one is, if you're banking at a big bank, get out of a big bank and go to a great Tennessee local bank. The second piece I gave you is a wonderful document on why a sovereign state bank or sovereign financials is great for the state of Tennessee, but it applies to any state. And Richard Warner, who is a top academic scholar in the world, I believe, on central banking, does a great job of explaining why lots of healthy little banks is the basis of a strong economy. You'll also see that with small farms. So the more small farms and strong small banks you have, the stronger your general economy is going to be. And so if you're not, if you're sending your money up to New York or Wall Street instead of, multiplying it through Tennessee communities, you're missing a great opportunity. Also, banking with a great bank. I have the world's greatest bank. And I can be anywhere in the world. I have a problem and they know me and I can get a decision maker and I trust them. It's a high integrity institution. So everybody deserves a good bank.
We've been watching the opposite of that. Banking's been consolidating for years. And so you're saying let's walk that back.
So I would say banking isn't banking. The banking system, a consolidation is being engineered. And that's part of the going direct reset. We just did a great interview on Solari called Stop the Steal. John Titus and I explaining, because there is an effort to steal the heartland banking system. We can't let it happen.
That's a strong word.
Yeah.
I mean, to steal something that belongs to someone else, that's the definition. So I know you're convinced that there's an effort to steal our freedom, our resources,
Absolutely.
our future.
Absolutely.
So this is going to take more than a casual response.
This is going to, I believe everybody listening to this is probably Revelations, right? So here's the thing to understand. You have a group of central bankers who've been trying to run things centrally for centuries. The reality is that digital technology gives them unprecedented powers to do things they've never been able to do before. And this is, the question of absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the technology allows them to do it. And I used to always, you constantly hear me say crime that pays is crime that stays. And if you look at the criminals, they've been cutting us in for a piece of the action, and we've been going along. And we've been going along, but they've been building, it's like building a corral. So the herd is sitting there and they've built three sides, and the digital ID and CBDC or any financial transaction control like that is the fourth side of the corral, and you snap it into place and suddenly we're in digital concentration camps. So.
Yeah, I believe you. My concern is I think we have been acclimated in the Christian community to being passive. They've sedated us in the corral. And I think we've reached a really critical point in the journey.
Right.
In my mind, there's so many parallels between what we're living through now and Europe in the 1930s.
Yes.
In the run-up to World War II.
Yes.
And we kept practicing appeasement.
Right.
So they've occupied Austria. Well, they have a historical. And now they've moved into Alsace. And, well, the boundaries were never clear. And Czechoslovakia makes some sense economically.
Right.
Until we got to the point that the only way to walk it back was to send troop carriers filled with young people against the shores of France.
Right.
And that took a mindset that we won't stop until we're triumphant. And that's why I think we're at a place where our passive, we'll argue about worship styles, and we're facing far more severe opponents.
Right.
So we've got to invite the people towards a different response, not anger, not belligerence, not violence.
Right.
But it's going to take a different kind of determination.
Right.
If we'd have said to those young men we were loading in those troop carriers to cross the English Channel, listen, if they don't have a parade when you get there or somebody shoots at you, get back in the boat.
Right.
We would all be speaking German.
Right.
And we're going to have some more determination.
Well, first of all, I think what most people need, because most people are overwhelmed and busy, right?
Yes.
So I think what most people need are practical actions they can take that move them from here to there. How do they get out of dependency on the system? How do they get out of the trance that the system is putting us into? We had a wonderful colleague on our team who drove to Maine with her husband for vacation this summer. And everywhere she stopped, the kids were checking them out of the restaurant or the grocery store. And they were using their phones as calculators. She said she made one purchase, which was $6 plus $4 plus $4, and the cashier, who was a teenager, couldn't do it in her head. She had to use her phone. And so my colleagues started talking to her and saying, "Why are you using the calculator for this?" And she said, "Oh, I used to be able to do it all in my head until I got my smartphone. In fact, I used to get all straight A's before I got my smartphone, but now I can't do it in my head, and my grades are really poor." And my colleague said, "Why don't you get rid of your smartphone?" And she said, "Oh, I could never do that." But there's an addiction to the trance. So, part of it is getting kids out of the smartphone and into the trees and into the beach and into the water. And
a family garden is a really good idea.
Yes. And part of it is, if you look at what's happening, there's a debasement of the food system, which is very dreadful. So anybody who can raise, even if you can only raise 10% or 20%, we have a wonderful colleague in Shelbyville whose sister got these things you stack up. They're like planters, and you stack them up. And she has them out on her balcony. She doesn't even have any land. And she's growing a huge amount of food just on her balcony in the stack. So, but anything you can do to build resiliency. So Resiliency is both, say, having a generator. So if the electricity goes out, you're not dependent, or having a garden, or getting some percentage of your food, or having the ability to can meat. If you look at what's happening with the meat supply, frightening. So building resiliency and building the skills to know how to do that, both yourself and with neighbors and other people, but also the more you can do for yourself, the less exposed you are to inflation. And as you know, right now, inflation is really, but the other thing is the more high integrity your sources are. So I used to be an investment advisor for many years.
Yes.
And I would have very wealthy people say, oh, organic food is too expensive. And I would say, really? It's very expensive to get sick, and you need to have, anything you can do to hook up with the local food systems and the farmers you can trust, because truly what is happening in the food supply is absolutely frightening. So what we all need to build resiliency is high integrity people. That's why you want to be in a good church, because it's a great way to meet high integrity people. And so whether it's your bank, whether it's your church, whether it's your neighbors, whether it's your farmer, you want high integrity sources of the things you need in your life. High integrity doctors and healthcare. We're watching a huge building of sort of parallel health systems, because we're going to have to be our own doctor and work with other people and healthcare practitioners to do health in a whole new way. Starting with prayer, I just have to tell you, because I think prayer is the best diagnostic tool, in the planet.
I don't disagree. You're a remarkable person. You look at our world with an honesty and a candidness, and yet you're willing to integrate it with faith without ignoring the reality. That's not typical in the world today.
So I said that this is a spiritual war. Each one of us has a choice, because the middle of the road is going away. It's gone. Right. We can be in right relationship with the Lord, or we can be in right relationship with the machine. You have to choose. And this, for me, the split came early. That's the only difference between me and everyone else. And I just kept trying to figure it out. But it's that, at the root, it's that simple. And once you realize I'm going to stay in a right relationship no matter what, then you devise your path from there. Day to day to day, minute to minute to minute, you just see, okay, how am I going to generate an income and be in right relationship? How am I going to take care of my health and be in right relationship? Yeah, that's where it starts.
May I ask what catalyzed that split? You said it came early in your life.
You mean well, what happened to me was I was the assistant secretary of housing, and because I wouldn't execute illegal grants, I got booted out. So I left, but I discovered
you maintained your integrity.
I didn't think of it that way. I avoided doing stupid things. Do you know what I mean?
I do know.
Yeah, because if I did those stupid things, someday they'd have a scandal, 50% chance I'm the fall guy, so I don't want to make myself out to be better. But here's the reality. In politics, the one thing that I never wanted to do was to get a control file. The first time you do an illegal act, they've got a control file on you, and then they own you. So, I didn't want a control file. Anyway. So I left, but I discovered the internet, and I realized we can so get the learning metabolism in a community up that if we can bring transparency to how money works within a place and how it relates to the living ecosystems, we can so increase the learning metabolism that we can create explosive amounts of new wealth. I was very excited about the possibility of re-engineering the federal budget on a place-based basis. And of course, if you look at new technology like learning technology, it should advantage the small guy. It gets the small guy in the game. But what was happening, so we built a company that brought financial transparency to federal money within a place. So if you're a small business, you could dial in and go, we had a tool called Community Wizard, and see how all the money worked on the federal money and credit in your place. And we were developing a community IPO kind of process where all the small businesses could cooperatively raise equity that could be could be sold to the pension funds or to local community members. What you'll find is when people own a stock, they support that company. And so the idea of being able to invest in a pool that was financing the local business created a really great dynamic between those. Anyway,
a synergy.
So we were working on that. And what we discovered, of course, that was not good for centralization. So you got in a huge fight with the Department of Justice. And, when they don't like what you're doing politically, they have to get rid of you. And of course, the biggest problem was the financial fraud, the mortgage fraud was skyrocketing, and our transparency destroyed the ability to do that mortgage fraud. So we had to go. Anyway, so if you've ever seen the movie Enemy of the State with Will Smith, it's one, I love that. I call it my training movie. But I played Will Smith in real life. And even in the movie, his office was a block away from where my office was in Washington. Anyway, so we got in a process that's very immersive. We had 18 audits and investigations, 12 tracks of litigation, a smear campaign, all sorts of physical harassment. So now one of our most successful series on the Solari Report is Deep State Tactics 101, because I learned so much about covert operations and dirty tricks. So did my general counsel. So we tend to do these things together. But the result of that was I got an incredible education in what is really going on. After the first 2 years, they had stolen so much of they seized our offices, stole my software, stole all sorts of assets. I won't bore you. And I was offered a chance to settle. And I realized what they were up to. I have an online book called Dylan Reed and the Aristocracy of Stock Profits that explains sort of that moment in the battle. And I realized if I go along with this, I'm going along with genocide. I'm going along with an effort to centralize political control that's going to destroy this country, and I'm not going to go along with that. That's not a life worth living. So I said, I'm going to fight, and I knew that would take years. I wasn't quite clear about exactly how many years, and I said, I'm not going along. So I got kicked out very early. And so that was 1998, and I've been doing it ever since, and was very much in the wilderness. It's one of the reasons I moved to Tennessee. I wanted to be with people who were close to the concrete world, who were grounded. Right. The people in Tennessee are so much more grounded. And the other thing is I was a Christian. The thing that saved my life during that period was I studied spiritual warfare at a great church in Washington. They had a great Bible Institute. For 2.5 years, I studied spiritual warfare. It was the reason we won, was we were able to integrate that knowledge with, we had great legal and financial skills, but we didn't have the spiritual warfare skills, and we were able to integrate that. And that enabled us to win. But it gave me a very early view into what was, so bad. And I just have to jump and tell you a church story, because this is exactly what's going to happen to everybody if it hasn't happened to you yet. Right after 9/11, I went to church, and I was a member of a small church in Hickory Valley, and the pastor got up to the podium. It was prayer service on Wednesday night, so 9/11 was Tuesday. And he got up and he said, George W. Bush was anointed by God for a time such as this. And at the time, I was very knowledgeable about some of the corruption of the Bush family. And you can edit this out if it's too strong. And he's a wonderful man. My pastor is a wonderful man. And I put my head in my hands and I started to pray. And I said, Lord, I need help. I need intercession. My family's going to be led to the slaughter, because I know they're going to war. And I said, but I didn't want to just mouth off. You just can't. I said, give me help. I need help here because I'm really scared about what's going to happen. And just then my pastor said to me, Austin, what do you think? That's my middle name, Austin, what do you think? And for him to ask me at a time like that, I thought, okay, that's intercession. So I took a deep breath and I said, Brother Keith, in my experience, the Bush family is anointed by financial fraud, narcotics, and pedophilia. And the whole church, my cousin just put her head in. It's like, oh no. And he said, oh, if that's true, we're lost. I said, don't be ridiculous. We have a governor. His name is God. I said, people like the Bushes and the Clintons come and go. And I had a wonderful neighbor who just hated the Bushes. And she said, yeah. And the expression "when two or more are gathered, there am I." It broke the trance.
Yes.
But what I was saying is, look, you have to go with God or the machine. And we have a governor, and we have to trust him. We have to trust that he is sufficient for our needs, and we don't have to go with the machine. And if we can just trust God, then we can make it up from there.
That is so important.
Yeah.
Well, our minutes are slipping away. So big finish. I want to ask 2 questions.
Okay.
I want to ask one about government and one about spiritual things.
Okay.
An opinion, because none of us knows.
Right.
But yours is an informed opinion. Do you think this republic of ours holds together, or do we break apart into a series of states and face the future with a different configuration than we have known?
Either is possible. I think the leadership at the top would love to see us break up. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the best thing for us to do. But I think we need to be prepared to build sovereignty bottom up as best we can. And the states are critical to either, providing something if it breaks up, or protecting and holding it together. And so this is why sovereignty at the individual, the local, and the federal level is so important. And there's something else that's important, because I was just over in Germantown with a wonderful ally who has been following us sermonizing on Daniel. And the message of the story of Daniel is, how do you stay in right relationship with the Lord when your culture is being defiled and you have a government that is not your government?
Right.
Right. And how do you pray for those in authority in that situation? And so part of maintaining sovereignty is maintaining that culture. And we can each do that, and it matters.
Our Bible is filled, our heroes are those examples
Right.
that have provided leadership when they were in cultures that were in opposition to them. Joseph,
Right.
Daniel, it's a pretty lengthy list.
Right.
Which is my second question. And I'm amazed, honestly, at the confidence you have in spiritual things and spiritual warfare. And I don't want to leave our audience frightened. I want them to be awake because God's watching over us.
Right.
But we have to choose him in a new way.
Right.
We can't do the same thing in the way we've always done it and expect a better outcome.
Right.
So any comments or suggestions on how to engage spiritually? I'm the preacher. They won't listen to me. They'll trust you.
I'm an investment banker. I'm the wrong person.
So between us, we'll muddle our way through. It's okay.
One of my favorite sermons says, he says, I want to talk to you about Jesus because I declare you're going to need him. I love that.
That'll work.
But there's a wonderful movie that the Italians made of Jesus. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Jacqueline Bisset plays Mary, which is very charming. But there's this wonderful, a couple of wonderful scenes where, like when Jesus is at the wedding where he turns water into wine. And, and the apostles are all striding. They're trying to get him out to go fight with the Romans. He's like, no, we have to love life and enjoy and drink wine. And one of my favorite gospel songs says, anybody who can turn water into wine is okay with me. But there's this, when you understand the love of the Lord, there's this, there's this lightness, there's this intelligence, there's this unbelievable way of looking at the world and accessing solution to problems. And that's what we've got, that's what I mean by right relationship. You've got to stay in right relationship, and you cannot let anybody take that away from you, including your love, because love is the source of your power. And that's, read the Bill of Rights. Our freedoms come to us from our Creator, and they are inalienable. And we have to become, we have to know that in our core. And truly, if we know that, then there's nothing we can't solve together, whether it's the food, whether it's the water, that's the energy, but we have to come to that together, which is why the church is so important, because that's where we come together.
Yeah, I agree. I think the appropriate formation of our character is going to be more necessary to our future than the compilation of our balance sheets.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We are allowing money to destroy our living equity. And living equity is the source of all wealth, including financial. You can't let that be destroyed.
Amen. My guest today, excuse me, is Catherine Austin Fitz, and you've given us some resources. You can go to Solari.com.
Solari.com.
And get financial transaction freedom, and then why a sovereign state bank is good for Tennessee.
Right.
And if you don't understand, read them until you do. The Lord will help you. Catherine, thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, and thank you.
You are a refreshing voice for truth.
Well, I'm going to be back hopefully on Saturday for a great sermon. So
awesome.
Yeah.
You're welcome here anytime. God bless you. Hey, this is Pastor Allen. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, like it, and most importantly, share it with your friends. If you want to be notified when there's new content, when we post new material, if you'll just subscribe to my channel and hit the bell, you'll get the notification. Most of all, I pray God blesses you as you continue on your spiritual journey and open your heart to the Lord. God bless.